All the data used in this demonstration is used with permission, courtesy of Mr. Mike Gervin of Excel is Fun. Our goals for the video. First, we're going to take Power Query and use it to import our data, because as with any data analysis, it always begins with the data. So we need a good, strong, powerful, efficient way to get the data. And then we're going to use formulas within Excel, they're a very integral part of Excel, in order to create our data model, which basically just means we're going to put it in a nice format with not just the raw data that we import, but also calculated information and looked up information based on what we know about our products and our sales reps, in order to prepare the data to have reports ran on it. That then leads us into our third goal for the video, which is to use the standard pivot table to create 3 different sales reports, which I'll go into a little bit of detail here in just a minute. And then finally, once we've got our reports made, we're going to come down here to the fourth goal, which is to use Power Query again to refresh our reports once new data arrives. Because as we all know, data is a very alive, it's a living, changing thing. It doesn't live on paper. We don't do data analysis on paper. We do it with computers for a reason. And so we're going to learn a very quick and efficient way to update our reports and everything with new data once we get it. The first report we're going to make is a common report, which it takes into account the year and month, and then calculates the total sales based on those criteria or those conditions. And then after we calculate all of that information with a pivot table, we're going to then create our first visualization, which is a line chart to show the sales trends over time. Second, we're going to create a report that displays information regarding region and year, so that we can compare region to region, and also dollar sales versus number of transactions. And then finally, our last report we're going to create is a cross-tabular report, which is basically where we take 2 different sets of conditions and put them up against each other, so that every piece of data in here matches up, in this case, a particular year and a particular supplier. All right, step number 1, we're going to come up here to the data tab to go to Power Query, which is this get and transform data, and also this queries and connections thing over here. We're going to go to the from text/CSV file, pull up the appropriate file and double click it. And now, very important to note at this step, there's this thing called the delimiter, which is basically when you import either a .txt or a .csv file, the delimiter is what separates each value in that file from the next. And so the Excel can interpret it as a data set. It looks here like everything is correct. The tab is correct for this file type. If it was a CSV file, which is comma separated values file, we would use a comma, but in this case it guessed it right. Let's go in here just to check the intelligence steps so we can kind of see what it did. So over here under applied steps, it has source, promoted headers, and changed type. So source, what that means, probably pretty self-explanatory. That's where it got the data. That's where we specified it. We can also change this later in case we get new data. That's what we're going to do actually as the last step to this little tutorial here. The next thing it did is it promoted the headers. So as you see here, when it got the data, this top row of data right here treated it just as a regular next, another row of data, but it promoted the headers because it wisely understood those are actually the header rows, or the header titles, and so that was very wise of Excel. The next thing is you'll see everything here by default is formatted to the left. What that means is that it's by default a text data type. You can also see that up here in these little symbols. This ABC means that it's a text data type. So it also interpreted correctly all of these as integers, which is what they're supposed to be, and this as date, which is also correct. And so everything here looks fantastic. We're going to come down here, or come up here to close and load. You want to close and load too, because you don't want it to go to a new sheet. You want it to go to the existing worksheet that we have here, and I want it to go up here to A9. And bam, just like that, we got all of our data. Look at that. We're going to control down arrow to see how many. We got 615, well, a little bit less because we're not all the way at A1, right? But something like 610-ish rows of data in 5 seconds. Pretty freaking cool. So now the next thing we want to do is we want to add a few more columns of data. This is our raw data, right? This is what we just imported. But now what we want to do is we want to add a few things for when we create our pivot tables. We're going to have one column of data for sales totals to be able to run summarizations on that data. And then we're going to have 3 additional columns of lookup information that will enable us to run analyses based on particular criteria that we're interested in. And so in this case, we want to know the sales total, the product name, the, what was the second one? All right, so it's the supplier and the region. So this is the sales total. That's pretty self-explanatory. The product itself, that information is held in a separate table that we had before we imported the data. We want to know, based on the product ID, what is the price that we're selling it at. Or excuse me, no, that's the sales. The product itself, the product name itself, and then the supplier, same sort of thing, except for the product, we want to know what who the supplier was for that product, or who it is listed for, you know, the information we have on our company. And then the region is not with respect to the product, but with respect to the sales rep. We want to know who, you know, based on the sales rep's ID, who sold that particular sale, where are they from, so we can run analyses on that. So we're going to start it off here with a very powerful and popular VLOOKUP function. This is one of the most important functions in business, is what I've been told. So VLOOKUP, what it does is you can look up a particular value in, so in this case, we're going to look up the product ID in a table array, and then once the VLOOKUP function finds that value, so it's looking up for 2. Once it finds that value, you can indicate where, which value in that same row do you want it to pull back. In this case, we want the price, right? Because we're going to multiply the price of the product that we're selling by the number of units sold in order to get the total sales in dollars that was made on that particular sale, all the way down. So we're going to go column index number 5 because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to close that off because the true false indication is not really that important in this case. So VLOOKUP, that we got that right. We've found the appropriate price for all of these, but now we need to multiply that by the units sold in order to get the sales number per in dollar amount. So same exact thing here. The only difference is we're not multiplying by anything. We're going to look up the product ID in the same table. And now it is in column 2, the product name that we want. Supplier, again, very similar. And then the region, which is also very similar, but we just have to look in a different table because it's held in a different area. And we're done. So now to create our first pivot table, what we're going to do is we're going to click any individual cell in this data model that we've just put together, and we're going to come up here to insert, and there's a pivot table button here, but we're actually going to go here. You know what? No, I think that button will work. So it's going to automatically select the table because it's in appropriate format, so it looks good. New worksheet. No, we wanted an existing one. And then when it's an existing is selected, we're going to come over here to the year-month sales. That's the one we're making. And click OK. Now this is where all of the magic is going to happen. Here we want to indicate the types of criteria and values that we want to see. The first thing is we're going to bring date down here. If you notice over here in the table that we made, there's only individual dates listed here, and there's no month column and there's no year column. And so, you know, each individual record is not indicating of that information, but Excel is smart enough to know when it's in date format, there's it automatically will detect the appropriate, you know, whatever that the term is for that. We actually don't even want quarters, so we can come down here, click it, the drop down arrow, and do remove field, and it'll automatically go to month instead, which I prefer. So we've got the rows. I'm actually going to come up here as well. Right click and expand all of these. And now we want to also add, so we got the year and the month, we want to see sales totals, right? So we're going to bring sales, that column from the data model, down here to values so that it automatically can calculate, boom, in literally seconds, all of the totals that are appropriate. I just, this is so amazing to me. Do you have any idea how long this amount of calculation would have taken by hand, or even with a calculator, but one by one by one? And Excel just did it for us in seconds. And we can do a couple of things even to not spice it up, but just make it look a little bit better. I'm gonna right click up here in the anywhere in the field values for the numbers and click number format. I'm going to change it to currency, but I'm going to get rid of the decimal places because we don't need that clutter. And there we go. We've got our first report, and it's already put together in a way that this is already extremely valuable information in a very small amount of time. But we're going to make it even better by adding now our first our first visualization. You can come up here after you click inside the pivot table, go to insert again, come over here to charts, and there's a little like scatter plot looking thing. You know, do the drop down menu and click the first line chart, and we've got this beautiful chart now. I'm going to hold Alt to lock it into these cells so it looks a little more clean, make it a little bigger, and this is amazing. So probably one of the most important things for me anyway, and I think probably in business as well, is getting rid of all the junk that's around the chart by default. Sometimes some of this stuff can be helpful, like if we had multiple lines, right? If we had multiple series is what it's called, it might be helpful to have a legend that indicates by color which is which and what each means. But in this case, we only have the one line. We really don't need that, so I'm going to go ahead and select it and click delete. We also don't need these things. These are buttons to be able to filter through the chart and look at, you know, different time frames and stuff like that. But we're actually more interested in filtering by something different, which we're going to do here in just a second. So we can remove those. You can right click on any of them and do hide all field buttons from the chart. And then I'm also going to change the title. We can just call it total sales, just because that's a little bit more accurate as to what we're looking at. And there we go. We've got our chart all finished up. We've already removed the decimal places, and so we don't need to worry about cleaning it up over there. And now we want to add a filter to this beautiful looking chart so that we can actually dynamically change what information we're looking at with this visual with a slicer, which is a user-friendly way to do this right here. So we're going to come over here, find product. See, we can add it to the pivot chart, or excuse me, to the pivot table directly, and we can have it up here. But it just, you know, it's like kind of obscure. You're not really able to see it very well, and you have to come up here and like do the drop down. You have to select which one you want and click OK, and then, you know, it works, but it's just kind of like wonky. It's not very pretty. So we're going to take that off, and instead we're going to build a slicer. We're going to come up here to insert, I think, yes, slicer, and same metric or whatever it's called, same yeah, metric. I'll settle on metric. Bring it down here beneath the table, and I guess I'll make it thin. And there we go. That's it. That's all you have to do. Now you can do the same exact thing, but very quickly and easily go back and forth between the four. And you can even click and hold Control to select more than one at a time, and you can see appropriately the information displaying for either of two products together over the course of time. And if you want to get rid of them, you just click that. All right, next report we're going to do, same process here. Come up to here to insert, pivot table, existing worksheet. Over here to region sales is the location we're going to put it in. And we're going to do basically the same thing, just with a little bit different criteria. This time we want to look at the region first. So we're going to bring that down here to rows. And then right under region, we want to know the year, because per region, each region per year, we want to know the total sales, and then we want to compare those year over year. So we got those criteria put up all good. We need to now see the sales and bring that down to values. Immediately, this is some sort of a kind of a pain. It's not really that big of a deal, but every time you do make a new pivot table, you do have to change the number format back. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. If I did that back in the data set, I think that actually would just do it automatically, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. So we've got the sum of sales. And now what's really cool about pivot tables is, in order to see the this final column that we want, right, we want to see the year over year change. And there's no button where you can do it just right away. But what we can do is we can bring sales down here again as a duplicate, and then we're just going to change the way that we're seeing the values, because after all, it is essentially the same information. It's just changing kind of like the I don't know what to call it, but anyway, all we really need is this right here. You can change it to anything you want. We can have here percent of grand total, percent of the column total, parent row, parent column. I don't really know what that means, but the one we want right here is the percent difference from, and we're going to specify from the year previous, because we want to look at year over year. If we're looking at this data piece right here, we want to know if this is the end year and this is the beginning, because this is the, we're looking at the difference. What is the percent difference over those two? I hope that kind of makes sense. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and click OK there, and we've got the percentages clicked out just like that. Pretty amazing stuff. Now, we're actually going to do something, kind of a bonus. We're going to do this exact same thing. The only difference is now, instead of just looking at the total sales, which I'll change this name here. Instead of just looking at the total sales in dollar amount, right? We actually want to look at the quantity of transactions that were made. So we're going to come back here to the data set, insert another pivot table. Whoops. And we're going to pull down the same information. Where is this? And years and even sale. Oh wait, no, that's different. All right, sorry, I had to check my notes. Okay, so check this out. We pulled down the region, the years, right? We got the criteria taken care of. But now, in order to get a count on the number of transactions that occurred, because the units here, that's different. The units is how many units of product X were made in each individual transaction. The count of the transactions is actually the count of all of these right here. And so for each one of these, we want one, all the way down. And so in order to get that, what we can do is we can basically pick whichever one of these we want. I'm actually going to do product though, because product is a text data type. And so by default, Excel is going to use that as a count. So you see, we can see count of product, and all of a sudden we have the right number. It's pretty amazing. We're going to change the name of this to number of transactions, because that's what it is after all. The count of the product, it's not how many products we have or sell or whatever. It's the count of the number of rows that product had, I think. Anyway, it's the number of transactions, and you can see this information summarized appropriately based on region. And we're going to do the exact same thing that we did over here to compare it year over year by adding it again, but changing the way that we view the information to show the percent difference from the previous year each time. And there you go. And so already you can see pretty interesting information here. You can see, for example, that from 2022 to 2023 in California, our sales by dollar increased by nearly 12%, but by transaction volume, they actually decreased by nearly 11%, which means that the number, the size of the transactions, or some of them anyway, had to be larger. So the quality, so to speak, of the actual transactions was improved to the point where even though we lost some of them, a good deal of them, in fact, nearly 11%, we actually increased our revenue. So without looking at, without seeing this, we wouldn't have been able to know that, and this warrants probably some further investigation. All right, now the last pivot table and report that we're going to do before doing the whole refresh with additional information, we are going to create the easiest pivot table by far so far, or by far throughout this whole demonstration. We're gonna create what's called a cross tabular pivot table, or a cross tab, maybe. No, cross tabular pivot table. Basically, all that means is that we're going to have two sets of criteria working against each other, or not against each other, but just they're both going to be satisfied simultaneously in order to get the individual piece of information within here. The information, the criteria that we're going to look at are the year in question and the supplier in question. And then the actual values that we want to see are the sales, the total sales, as we've been interested in this whole time. And instantly, we've already got all the information that we want. We can change the number format if we wish to make it look a little cleaner. And there we go. So what this means now is that in the year 2022, just as an example, the year 2022, the supplier gel booms, the products that we sold that are supplied by gel booms, totaled out to $370,000. We sold that much worth of product that are supplied from gel booms in that year. So hope that makes sense. That is it for the reports. All right, beautiful. So we have created our, we've done our data modeling. We've created our 3 reports. Now, let's say that, you're in the real world, data is incoming newly all the time, and so now we have an additional data file, a newer data file, that we need to also incorporate into this data model that we have, and we're basically just going to add data onto the bottom of this, but we want to do it in a way that's, efficient. And so we're going to come to the same place that we did the data, the initial import. We're going to come up here to data, but instead of getting from text CSV, that would be like an original source. We're going to change the source to reflect the update in the file. So we're going to come up here to queries and connections instead. And we're going to come over here. Remember seeing this earlier. This is where we have all of the intelligent steps that we were looking at earlier. So we're going to come down here to edit. This is actually where we're seeing the intelligent steps. And this source, remember when I said, walk through these intelligent steps, we can actually come over here to this little gear icon to update the source. So we're going to come over here to browse, and we're going to change, instead of this one, which was the initial data type, or the data file, we have a new data file with updated data. And it's the same file, but with the additional data included in it. So we're going to change that source, click OK, and as soon as it's applied in there, again, close and load, and look at this. Boom! 858 rows in data. I don't know if you caught it before, but it was something like 606 earlier. We can go down here and double check. 867 as opposed to the 615-ish earlier that it was. And we can come over here and we can see these aren't updated automatically, but we can right click on any of these reports and click refresh. And you see all of a sudden we have an additional year of data calculated and everything, visualized and everything, beautifully integrated with this beautiful slicer without a second thought. And all of these ones are updated automatically as well. Look at this. This is interesting. From 2023 to 2024, in California, our dollar amounts of sales increased by 12.5%, but they actually decreased in Washington by about 4.5%. That's very interesting. So this is the power of Excel. I hope that you enjoyed this demonstration. Follow me on YouTube, connect with me on LinkedIn. Have a great day.